Congressman, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. I've been reporting on conflict and politics in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India, three countries I have lived in, reported from, and still have family and friends in for the last 25 years. Frankly, I'm a fish out of water here in Washington. I really shouldn't be here. I should be back home in and yet, I can't be back home because home no longer feels like home. Strangely, I have easier access to this capital here in Washington than my own capital city of Islamabad, which ironically means the city of Islam, a religion of peace and tolerance. And yet, in that city is where some of my colleagues are buried today. Colleagues like journalist Ashad Sharif, like Salim Shahzad, who were killed in the line of duty for doing what they were supposed to be doing in the business of accountability and truth-telling. They were killed for doing their job. Today's briefing is an attribute to heroes like them, heroes who are no longer with us, but have given us the courage carrying on this work of speaking truth to power. The steady attrition of democratic rights and journalistic freedoms over the last 2 decades has seen thousands killed in my country, including dozens of fellow journalists. The pace has picked up, especially over the last few years, and has led to this difficult moment for me and some of my friends on this panel. I really should be bursting with pride being able to speak at this great forum. I mean, the congresswoman here is from Michigan, where I went to college, and is a local hero for so many years. But I don't have that pride. I shouldn't, because that pride should come from the distinction of being embedded with and covering over 100 of the bravest of the Pakistan Army's 250 military units deployed on some of the country's most intense front lines, seeing that country's most courageous soldiers sacrifice their lives, pride which comes from hailing from 3 generations of public servants and law enforcement officials. My late father led Pakistan's intelligence bureau. My stepfather served as an instructor in Pakistan's Army aviation. Pride which comes from launching the country's first independent and Urdu and English news channels and interviewing dozens of its leaders and influencers. And yet, here I am, a prisoner outside my own country because of the way Pakistan's military and military-backed leaders have treated their best and brightest. What I'm about to tell you and ask of you, I do with a heavy heart. Today, I'm asking and making a case for movement, for action. I'm making a case for sanctions. Not sanctions that hurt my country, not sanctions that hurt the 250 million people of Pakistan, over half of which still live under the poverty line, but policies that force change at the very top of the country's Praetorian military and military-backed leadership. As this great country starts with a new Congress and administration, the U.S. must be aware of the flaws and fallacies of its ongoing policies for Pakistan, but also the promise and potential for new ones. The U.S. must be aware because awareness is power. And this Congress should be aware that America's lack of action around repression such as blatant election rigging, mass arrests, internet shutdowns, abductions and assassinations of journalists and civil rights leaders, and incarceration of democratic leaders like Imran Khan has been interpreted by the military regime as a green light from Washington for further progression. This lack of action endangers not just Pakistanis there, but also many of the 1.2 million Pakistanis right here, whose families, loved ones, businesses, and freedoms have been targeted by the Pakistani regime through transnational repression. The wave of this repression runs from my home province of Balochistan, where thousands remain missing, abducted by the state, to just next door in Baltimore, which is, like so many other American cities, becoming a shelter of asylum for an increasing number of Pakistanis who are leaving the country in record numbers today, even on ships which sink halfway to Europe, numbers that have put Pakistan at the top of the world's destinations to leave and at the bottom of the world's index of countries to live in. Whether intended or not, the lack of any consequence of Pakistan on the unprecedented and well-documented human rights violations of the past 2 years have incentivized the regime to brutally crack down on not just the protest of November 26th, as movie Pizzada and Ryan Grimm have stated out, but also students, lawyers, activists, even women and children demanding justice and freedom. Freedom to vote, freedom to assemble, freedom to report, freedom to meet their missing relatives, even freedom to tweet. That's right. Just this morning, the government has further affirmed a law that sentences people to 3 years of prison time for a tweet that the regime may deem as fake or coercive. This just happened this morning as we were getting ready for this conference. Zeroing in on Pakistan's military leadership, they rationally believed that they could do more easily, they could weather any blowback for the mass shooting because of the other alternative. Mass protests were likely to gain steam and get international media attention. Attention they were scared of. That's what I'm asking for today, Congresswoman. Attention. Given its bilateral history with the US, given the dependencies of its military and leadership on Western aid, given that they draw legitimacy from acts of aid and support from this very Congress, given that they train here, retire here, bank here, and invest here, Pakistan would be virtually certain to change its policies of repression if the US even credibly threatened any meaningful action against the senior military or military-backed leaders of that country. The years of silence of the Biden administration, driven by dependency on the Pakistani military by Washington, have been countered by the brave resolutions of this very Congress, H.R. 901, passed last summer, which demanded an investigation into last February's hijacked election. But more is required. Targeted sanctions against architects of the repression, that's top military, intelligence, and government officials who've been named. I'll name them again for the record. General Asim Munir, Interior Minister Mohsen Naqvi and company. Threats to stop coveted U.S. military training and cooperation or conditions on major loans that require Pakistan to adhere to basic democratic norms would immediately lead to change. Trust me, it's happened before. To end, Washington has relied on Pakistani military for its geopolitical goals in the region for decades. But what has that dependency given Washington? Osama bin Laden being housed in a military garrison town? And Afghanistan, where the Taliban still rule and repress women and hold Americans hostage? A South Asia where trade with India or curbing the influence of China or normalization with Iran is still a far shot? And in the middle of all of this, after receiving billions in aid and arms and decades of being given either a green light or being shown a yellow one for tacit approval, lies the unreliable partner. The unreliable partner, that is the Pakistani military. The more reliable partners of America are in this room. The best and brightest civilian leaders and activists, entrepreneurs and economists, inventors and influencers are being held hostage by that unreliable partner. This action, targeted sanctions, or the credible threat of sanctions, has given the US results in the past, so why not try it again? Finally, this isn't about Imran Khan. It's about what the millions of who will survive Imran Khan, both there and here in the US, who will blame Washington in a wave of growing anti-Americanism if the tide is not turned now. There's a joke they tell in GHQ, General Headquarters, the home of the Pakistani military, in Rawalpindi, that the shortest flight to that city takes off from Washington, D.C. This city has power, and it's time for the most powerful in the city, you, the U.S. Congress, to hop on that flight. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Wajahat. So that very compelling your own personal story, and also for those compelling arguments about why the U.S. needs to reevaluate its relationship with the Pakistan military. And with that, I'm now going to turn to Mr. Benjamin Linden, who is the Advocacy Director of Europe and Central Asia at Amnesty International. He will share the various